So when I was little, though, I was always into like the physical sciences. I think that that's probably one of the things that if I could thread a connection between who I am now and start to see some of that as a child. I was always doing either taking things apart. They would never go back together, but I would take things apart and, oh, I've got this little motor from my Walkman, which is kind of like an iPod before iPods.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself one teeny tiny little favor and make sure to give us a follow because I don't want you to miss out on any of the amazing guests I got coming on this year. And so this is my third interview, back-to-back weeks, right? Back-to-back weeks, interviewing for this show that I still can't tell you guys much about. Just know it was a great show, right? It's called The Blocks if you haven't already know, but I can't tell you much about it yet. And this guy was actually one of the judges that I got to connect with and got to talk to while at the at the Blocks. And oh my goodness, dope guy, super down to earth. And for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to get to know him, to get to meet him yet, Tyrone, tell us your elevator pitch, man. Who are you and what do you do?
Oh man, yeah. Well, first of all, John, thanks for having me on. Super excited to reconnect with you after obviously getting to meet one another at the Blocks. Yeah, my name is Tyrone Hazen, serial entrepreneur, and I started a company a couple years back, about 6 years ago, called Puffin Drinkwear. We make apparel for your drink to wear, so clothing for beers, basically. And we've had some incredible success with that. And so that has allowed me to parlay that into kind of a coaching and consulting services focused specifically on early stage consumer product good companies, people that have an idea they want to see manifest physically in the world, and or people that have gotten started and are looking for like hyper growth and wanting to know kind of how to go about doing that. I provide guidance on things like that.
Amazing. And before we get into all that good stuff, take us back in the time machine a little bit. What was little Tyrone like growing up? What was your childhood like? Were you always this entrepreneur guy? Like, what was it like?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in a really small town in Oregon. And my
Whereabouts?
father, it's a town called Canby. So it's a suburb of Portland.
All right. Do you know a town called before sorry for interrupting, town called Boardman?
Boardman. I don't know Boardman.
Okay.
No.
Supposedly Boardman, Oregon is like my third most listened to city. I don't know who's over there in Oregon listening to my podcast. I never visited, don't have any family out there or friends from
Boardman.
that I've met yet, but Boardman,
All
Oregon is
right.
like my third most
They're
listened
holding
to
it
city.
down.
Yeah, they're holding it
That's
down.
awesome, man. I'll look into that. I'm gonna figure out where. I mean, I live in Oregon now. I've moved New York and LA and all over the place, but I'm back in Oregon
Yeah.
now. Yeah, I
Okay.
haven't come across a Boardman. I'll look it up. Check that out. So yeah, I grew up. It's a small farming town, suburb of Portland, and I was born in 1980. So just to date myself a little bit. So I grew up pre internet, pre cell phones, and I mean I remember having my first pager when I was like 14. So I came up through like this steep curve of technological development and advancement. So when I was little, though, I was always into like the physical sciences. I think that that's probably one of the things that if I could try and like thread a connection between who I am now and start to see some of that as a child. Um, that's definitely, I mean, like I said, I like physical products, and I think that's why I think I've always had an appreciation for the physical world. And I was always doing either taking things apart. They would never go back together, but I would take things apart and, oh, I've got this little motor from my Walkman, which is kind of like an iPod before iPods. And I was trying to always I was always making weapons, as a kid, trying to make things to defend myself or something. But yeah, I always had an idea of desiring to run a business and be in business. And I don't know where that came from. My dad was a dentist, but he always had ideas. He always had inventions that he was working on. And I think it's somewhere along the lines I must have discovered businessmen and just was compelled to do that. I remember at one point I wanted to like run an airline, which sounds absolutely miserable to me now. Like I did not at all have the skill sets for that. But so business kind of got supplanted in my mind. And then I also, like I said, like physical stuff. I was always tinkering in a shop. I had a dad who's a tinkerer. And so that has been a thread that has continued through my entire life, even though I've kind of gone off paths many times. I've come back to that and have been lucky enough to like find a chord that I could follow that resonates in a way that is able to kind of support me at this point.
Yeah, that's dope. I know for me, like I'm similar to you, I wasn't very entrepreneurial in like the sense like I had the lemonade stand or anything like that. I always say.
Okay.
But my first experience with like entrepreneurship personally was sophomore junior year. Was in high school. This guy named Mr. Tamalini had an entrepreneurship class that was an elective. I had some elective class spots, and I was like, boom, why not? And I don't remember anything that we learned, honestly. I just remember we watch Shark Tank every Friday religiously. Like
Okay.
that was our class every single Friday was we watched Shark Tank. And so that was my first kind of, I guess you could say, like taste of entrepreneurship. But I don't really remember. I think we did like one project we had to talk about a business idea. I vaguely remember it, but like that was
Hmm.
like the first thing, and it didn't even really plant the seed in me for entrepreneurship. I just took the class because I know it was an easy A, honestly. But that's the only reason why. So like, how earlier late in the game did you have like that first experience into entrepreneurship? What was that like? And was it something monumental?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think it's an interesting question, and kind of going back to your comment about not having an interest in entrepreneurship for quite some time. I don't know. I would suggest that entrepreneurship, as it, like, the broadest definition of that is just people that have ideas, right? And then like
Hmm.
you pursue them in some way. So I don't know that I would consider, like, I worked from a very young age. I had a paper route as a little kid, and then
Okay.
prior to being able to work, I was a dishwasher at a restaurant in town when I was 14. And then my first like W-2 position was at Taco Bell. And I went from that into like a family fun center and worked at like the game counter where people would come up and turn in tokens for their, or tickets for prizes and things like that, and mini golf, whatnot. So I always worked a lot, but I think, like I said, that everybody's got ideas, man, right? Everybody
Hmm.
has some thought, and an entrepreneur is just somebody who follows those ideas without necessarily knowing how to make them come to reality. So it's this idea of, if you're going to try and like if you're going to try and go to a particular destination and you wait for all of the lights to turn green, you're never going to go. But those of us that are like, I'll figure it out. Like, I'll just drive and then I'll run into a problem. I'll figure out how to solve that. That's kind of how I define entrepreneurship. So, and I guess maybe you want to throw in a component that is like designed to have some kind of a revenue stream.
Yeah.
So I would say, man, you'll find commonality here. I probably the first time I would say I was actually running a business of sorts was when I was in real estate. I was a real estate agent. I
Really?
got into, yeah, I got into loans first. So I graduated college in 2002, and that was when the market was just
Yeah,
ripping,
the
right?
dot
And so
com bubble time
yeah, well,
period.
dot
Yeah.
com, yeah, kind of exactly. And so people are throwing money left and right into housing, and so I got in there through mortgage brokering, and which is selling mortgages to, well, whatever, you're a broker.
Yeah, yeah,
It's you're
yeah.
you're in between.
Uh,
And then one of my clients hired me to go be a mortgage originator. So now I'm like out there meeting with the actual people, helping fill out loan documents, and getting them the funding that they needed to refinance or something. And then from that, I used that whole thing as an education. I thought I wanted to get into. Here's the backstory. Let me back up for a second.
Yeah.
I read Rich Dad Poor Dad
Okay. Same here.
as a senior in college, and I was actually on a trip. I was coming through this town that I live in now. I live in a town called Bend, Oregon, and I was coming through this town, and we met with it was a road trip with a bunch of buddies from UCLA, and we got to stay for a couple of days with one of these guys' uncles, and he had done really well. It was like the nicest home I'd ever stayed in. And so one day out at breakfast, one of the buddies with me had the courage to ask the guy. He was like, "Hey man, you're sitting here with about, like, there's four guys about to graduate from college, and you've done very well for yourself. Like, what advice would you give?" And he basically just pointed us towards the book. It had just come out. And so I picked up the book at the airport before we flew back. We road tripped up and then flew back to LA. And so my buddy actually bought it at the store, and I was like, "Hey, can I read that on the flight?" And then we got off the flight. I was like, "Man, I'm keeping this. I'll give it back to you tomorrow." I finished it that night. I changed my major. I was a physics major, and I changed to economics, which is the closest thing we had to a business degree. And I just wanted to go all in on that world of understanding wealth generation, and all, how to leverage that, what knowledge I need to have. And I really, really liked one of the advisors that was with that whole crew with Robert Kiyosaki was a guy named Dolph DeRoos, and Dolph did the book on real estate investment, and so that resonated with me. So that's how I got it. That's why I started looking at mortgages and real estate and that kind of stuff. And it just happened to time well that the market was on the rise at that point in time. So got into mortgages, and then kind of learned the financial side of that business and the financial side of investing in real estate, and then parlayed that into a job just selling real estate. So while I'm making money selling properties to people, I'm getting an education. I'm finding the deals before they're public. I'm understanding how other people are investing, what they're doing, how they're leveraging things. And so I got really creative and managed to. I started with a loan of $3,000 from one of the former employers of mine that I was doing the mortgage stuff with, and I borrowed $3,000 from him, and then over a period of 18 months to 2 years, ended up purchasing 7 homes. And this is all in the Phoenix area. So, there was ripe opportunity to be doing all sorts of creative things, all above board and legal, but definitely like out of the box thinking type of things. And so anyway, to back to your actual question. So kind of when I got into real estate, I first worked on a team. I was on a team within Keller Williams in the Phoenix area. And then eventually was like, I don't need the team anymore. I want to go hang my own. So I started a Hazen Realty Group. I got to like brand myself. I went out and did all the things that people think this is what starting a business means, which is like, I get to design a logo and I get to start up a website and make business cards and all the things that are like, we call it entrepreneuring, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the things that are like, yeah, man, that doesn't really move the needle. It's fun and you're playing entrepreneur. But it's the easy, fun, external exposure stuff. So you can show your friends like, yeah, man, I own my business. I have a business card to prove it. It was that kind of world. So that was kind of when I first started really understanding the nuts and bolts of what it takes to like to kind of fend for yourself out there in the world and not be a W-2 employee.
Yeah, man. We have a lot of similarities. I didn't know we
I
have
think
business.
so.
Yeah. So literally my college. So it was my sophomore year, not senior. My sophomore year of college, I just also happened to be in the middle of a pandemic. So scratch aside from the pandemic part, right? Um, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like that was like the first book I read. I honestly can't tell you why I read it. Don't remember why, but I
Oh,
picked up 3 books. I went to Barnes and Noble. It was Rich Dad Poor Dad, I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, and Index Funds for Dummies. And those are the first 3 books I
wow.
ever bought. And then so this is now October, November of 2020. Pandemic
Mm-hmm.
just kicked off pretty much. And
Mm-hmm.
then that December, instead of buying a real estate book, I actually bought a real estate wholesaling course. And so I
Okay.
took this it was $500, my first course ever. I went through the course, got my logo, my domain name, my LLC filed, Nutmeg Home Buyers LLC, I think it's called. I
Okay.
still have the LLC filed. And then I was like, all right, Connecticut's an attorney closing state, so I'm gonna call up a couple attorneys, and
Okay.
all right, I'm gonna make sure I got a good one on my side. So when I find a deal to wholesale, everything's all good and dandy, and I don't have any issues. And I
Mm-hmm.
talked to the first 4, didn't know what they were talking about, and then this one guy who he was probably, looking back at it now, the biggest teacher's pet ever. Because
Okay.
like according to like the bylaws or whatever, it's like you cannot legally transact in real estate on the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning you can legally transact in real estate off the market. It just has to stay off the market, right? So like this guy
Sure.
he probably got an A in every class because he studied very hard. But bro, like you have
Mm-hmm.
to think outside the box. Like it doesn't say
Right.
that you can't do this. It just says that if you're on the market, you have to be licensed. But at that
Sure.
time, that was the quote unquote professional, right? So I'm like, all right, he has to be right because he was so confident, right? That's another
Mm-hmm.
thing. Just because someone sounds confident doesn't know what they mean what they're talking about. Like that guy probably never invested
Absolutely.
a day in his life, and from there I ended up getting so I was still in college, sophomore year started. I ended up dropping out to pursue real estate, started my real estate classes. I got licensed with Keller Williams as well. So so as soon as
Awesome.
I got licensed with Keller Williams here in Connecticut, and honestly, I actually didn't sell any houses. I did 4 rentals.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But during my time being in real estate, similar to you, man, I know a thing or two about a thing or two when it comes to real estate. And not
Mm-hmm.
just the residential side, but like I'm pretty savvy when it comes to investor topics as well. I went to a lot of real estate
Okay.
investor meetups. I know a lot of investors doing some numbers out here in Connecticut locally and
Mm-hmm.
across the state, the country as well. And like just
Okay.
conversations with them, it makes you savvy to things that like are usually unheard of. And so it's like
Sure.
I'm not there yet, but like best believe when I get to that stage, I already know a thing or two about a thing or two. So like,
Yeah.
it's definitely amazing for the education, and then through real estate, it end up leading to all these other stuff that I have going on. But like very similar to you, like I got into real estate because I thought it was gonna be a great learning opportunity, which it was, and it still is. And
Sure.
now it's like I got tools that, even though I'm not using them now, are gonna come in handy once it comes, comes time to buy my own house and all that stuff, get,
Hmm.
renovations and remodeling. And my dad also is a landscaper. So like
Okay.
when it comes time to, like, if I have to renovate my house, he's already tapped into all the trades guys, right? So I'm
Right.
make sure just to definitely not get screwed over and have something wild happen.
Sure, man. No, and you make a good point in regards to kind of like your community and your network and how that can help you level up even if you're not ready now. And that's kind of top of mind for me. I got invited to a meeting last week. I got invited to this lunch with a small group of people, and they're recruiting for this organization. I won't mention the name of it, but I was recruiting for this organization that's international, and it's for ultra high net worth individuals. So I didn't belong there because they
Mhm.
immediately threw up like, "Hey, here's what it takes to be a part of this group," and I was like, "Nah, it's not. I'm not there yet, right?"
Yeah.
But it gave me the sense, like getting to hear some of the people that were already members and getting to hear them kind of talk and recruit to some of the others that might have been able to like to get involved if they were interested. Hearing the types of things they're talking about and understanding the world that they come from and the world that they're in and how different it is from the world that I'm in, but I want to be in that world. It gives you a little bit more clarity on where the mountaintop is that you're trying to pursue. And with that destination in mind, now you can start to piece together like, oh, okay, what are the tools that I need to get there? Who's already been there before that I can ask some of these questions? How do I navigate this path? So I'm looking for like that mid step now. So I talked to the person that invited me. I was like, hey, I'm not in this yet, but um, it just knowing that groups like this exist and they're talking about the types of things that they're talking about, those are the circles I need to be involving myself in. Those are the type of people that I need to get spend time around. So you start to hear how they've done what they've done. So yeah, I mean, we both have that in common, right? Where there's just this commonality of surrounding yourself and seeking knowledge from others.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that because
Yeah.
the first time where I was like I really just felt like my whole, like, everything I knew was like complete BS. I went
Mm-hmm.
to a money, like a 2-day money workshop
Okay.
back last year, one of my boys, and he's into like trading and options and stuff like that. So I figured he'd be a good guy to go with. And so me and him, we go to New York, which is about an hour drive from where I'm at now, currently in
Mm-hmm.
CT. And we go there, and they start talking about how the ultra wealthy people move money. And everyone always talks about like real estate is where, made the most millionaires, the best wealth generating tool, whatever, whatever. But like all the ballers, like they're making private equity plays. Like, yeah, real estate
Business.
is dope, but no, but like it's all business, all private equity. And like they started breaking down, like, for example, like a traditional, and for anyone listening, it'll get a little nerdy. And I still don't really understand this stuff myself, so don't ask me questions either. But like he was talking about like the different type of accounts, like how, let's say, a traditional Roth IRA, right, which is an investment account for anyone listening. Like usually you put money, let's say, at a company like a brokerage like Fidelity. You put your money into your account, and then from there you can put your money to buy a certain number of stocks. Let's say Tesla, right? You say I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
buy 5 shares of Tesla, whatever the price is, whatever. You put the money in, you invest, buy, boom. But like what he was like explaining is that the person who moves the money makes the money. So like, yeah, you get your let's say 8% or whatever the number is, but like these people that are moving the money, like the Fidelities, the intermediaries, like they're really making money. And like the way that like
Mm-hmm.
these ultra wealthy people do, they have like self-directed accounts where like they have a custodian, right? And a custodian makes the, moves the money, but like the custodian is really just doing their bidding. So in fact, they're really moving the money. And so like they get to keep so much more of what they make and get into these deals where these accounts are like, they're bankruptcy proof, creditor proof, judgment proof. So it's like once the money is in there, you'll never be able to get it. And they just do
Right.
all these. And that was the first time ever where I was just like, man. And then they have the mastermind for like 15K. I'm like, I'm not there yet. But like, I was like, the fact that any of this stuff is just like going on in like broad daylight, like, and none of us have ever heard, at least me and my boy, have ever
Sure.
heard of any of that stuff. I was like, man, there's so much that I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, we're talking about Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that's a really great foundation. And that you just read that book and others like it, and you're already at like, 95th percentile of understanding of how things work. Like
Hmm.
you don't go become a doctor to make money. That's not the best path to wealth creation. There are all these other different things. And most society doesn't know that at all. But then to your point, that's just barely scratch, or not even. That's like, like scraping the surface of the true knowledge of like wealth generation. So, but that gives you a foundation to build from. And then as you dive deeper into some of these things, I mean, I'm in we're in a Series B round raising funds for my company right now. And having watched from the inside as I went out and raised the first, we did what's called the safe round, which is kind of like a convertible note type thing. And then that rolled into a Series A round, which is institutional investors coming in. And now we're doing a third round. It's called the Series B round. And watching I mean, it's unfortunate because I'm on the wrong side of the deal, but watching like my ownership just dwindle as these other people with have money in pocket and how they can make moves and how having money can make you more money. And it's not just interest, right? Interest is, yes, definitely like one of the players in the game, but um, discounts that they can get. I mean, there are people coming in and investing in my company that just the discount that they're getting by putting money in now and not closing for 3 months nets them more ownership in my company than my annual salary, just because they had the money to give to like commit to it now. I mean, it's fascinating to get kind of like, so once again, like, yes, I hope that at some point in time, this will be my level up and I'll get kind of cashed out on this business that I own. And I still own a nice piece of it, but the education that I've received for not just how to do it, but seeing how these folks, and you mentioned PE firms, like the cool thing about a PE firm, or like what they're really doing there, is by buying businesses, it's kind of like you've got a bunch of different levers that you're playing with there. You're leveraged in a number of ways. You're leveraged in the capital that you have and that's being invested in, that the business has, the assets that the business has. And you're also getting to take advantage of the leverage that they have on human capital. Whereas like in real estate, you're leveraged because sometimes you can put 20% down and then you own the whole asset, or you at least you've got an entire asset that's increasing at 7% per year. But there's no people involved. You're not leveraging people in that scenario. But you take a business and you're doing the same thing. It's almost like having a piece of real estate, but you're also you got 50 employees that are all working for you, and you've got those leverage. So PE firms are taking a little slice or a big slice of multiple businesses, and they're like leveraged on leveraged on leveraged. And if you make good decisions, that leverage works in your favor. Now that's the challenge. A lot of us don't get there because if you're leveraged and you make a bad decision, that leverage is working against you. So like leverage and decision making go hand in hand, man. And there's obviously a lot of components to all this stuff, but it's fascinating to learn from people that have been there that are doing it.
Yeah, one of the things I realized from talking to people like that is like you think like it's levels to the game where it's like I'm playing high school, let's say basketball. I'm playing high school
Mm-hmm.
basketball, and that makes some more money, and then I'm playing college ball, and then I make some more money, and then I'm playing in the NBA. Like once I get to like the ballers, and it's like for what I realized, it's like right now you're like playing high school at least I'm playing high school basketball, and like the people up at the top, they're like playing professional football. Like it's a whole different game.
It's a different game.
They're not playing by the same rules. They're not just
Yep.
better than me at this game. They're playing a whole different game and have their
Mm-hmm.
own thing that they're. And it's like it was just so eye opening. And even though I couldn't act on any of that information at that point in time, I feel like just like I said with the whole idea things, just going to things like that stretch your. And you mentioned mountaintops, right? For
Mm-hmm.
me, it just stretched what I thought was possible and what I thought could be done and couldn't be done. And so
Mm-hmm.
now it's like I'm creating these ideas and stuff. And you mentioned entrepreneurs as like ideas. I'm a little bit of a tangent, but I always said that entrepreneurs are just big kids with a business, right?
Okay.
What do kids do, right? They just think of stuff and do random like BS and
Sure.
like, well, we turn that and make that into an actual business. As you said, added a revenue component to it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like all these ideas, when you have like more awareness, I feel like it just adds so much more to your creativity because now you're not limited by the confines of what you thought was possible. Now you get a whole nother world, and now it's like you can be even more creative, and it gives you, at least for me personally, a lot to aspire towards. Because I also want to like, I want to play for a little bit. I don't know how I'm gonna play in that, how long I'm gonna play in that game, but like
Sure.
I definitely want to get subbed in. I want to get my minutes in the game,
Mm-hmm.
do a little
Mm-hmm.
damage, and then get get out.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like, I mean, the things that have drawn me to kind of where I'm at now and some of the things I've tried in the past were like, it was play. These are things that I enjoy. I didn't go out and like reverse engineer the most profitable business and the fastest way to grow a business, which you could do, right? If your play is business, then that's a great way to do it. Go out and find, like, should I do a service-based business, product-based business, tech business? And you can kind of like back into what you should do, and then go find a thing that you can lever that's kind of like the seed to that, and go chase it back up. Find, like, use that to find an idea, or to point you towards an idea. I come up with the idea first, and I get so excited about it. I just have to have it. I want to see it in real life. I want to see if I can go build an audience for it. And so, yeah, it's a form of play, to your point, only with a particular, like, there's a scoreboard and there's a goal in mind, and that's
Yeah.
usually, financially baked, or time freedom. That's kind of my the new distraction for me, is trying to figure out, how do I gain more freedom of time and be like more effective with the time that I have in regards to how I exchange that for, for like my financial resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say, like, one of the guys I follow, he also made time freedom his thing. So like one of his, like,
Mm-hmm.
I forget what the actual timeline he said, but like, he said something along the lines of like, if you can't make at least 7 figures a month working under 10 hours a week, then you're not running the business properly. And like, it's something that's
Yeah.
like, well, I mean, you can only go, I mean, you can keep on going so high with revenue, but like after a certain
Mm-hmm.
point in time, it's like, how big do you really want to grow? And not everyone wants to become a billionaire. Not everyone wants to become a millionaire, but everyone could use some more time to spend with their loved ones, right? And spend
Absolutely.
some more time to, you know, pursue their passions, right? Whatever that may be. And so like his thing was, he started off his business, he had moved. I think he had just gotten bankrupt or laid off or something like that. I think he had just gotten laid
Mm-hmm.
off. Didn't really have money. He moved to help his friend start a church. So he's already like tapped out, doing like 40 hours a week with the church, and because he was playing for the band and stuff like that, and doing
Okay.
music. And then started his business. So he never ever could really work full time in his business. It was always like under 30 hours a week, right? Because he
Mm-hmm.
still had his family and his kids.
Okay.
And it's just like, he was always strapped on time. So he just figured out how to grow his business without much time. And like, so that kind of like
Man.
became his angle. And so like, you hear something like that, it sounds a little obnoxious at first. Like, all right, we get it.
Right.
You're a millionaire and you get to do whatever you want whenever, because you don't have to work. Like, it's like, how much better can it get than that, man? But like,
Sure. Yeah.
it's just like, as you said, like, there's a game and there's scoreboards, and like when it's playing, like, how good can I get at this game that I'm playing business? Like, a lot of us entrepreneurs, sometimes we come from sports, and like after a while we can't, I stopped playing football after high school. It's like, I don't have any
Mm-hmm.
other sports to really play, and even if I play like a men's league, it's not the same as like being
Mm-hmm.
hyper competitive. So it's like, put a lot into this, like into this game of business that we're playing. It's like, I don't know, how good can I get? I mean, LeBron, he's like 40 and still putting up, 25 a night. Like,
Right.
it's just like, how good can I get at this game called business?
Sure. Yeah, and then, there is that acknowledgement that that we're all starting from different places too, right? Like,
Mhm.
if you come from little financial resources, low education level, no one in your family knows business, all these things, there's likely to be a limit to how high you can go. Now, no one's going to stop you from going all the way to the top, but the idea that that you are starting in the same position that someone who comes from famous parents and a ton of money, and they just need to get an idea and throw their face on it and can go build this thing. It's not at all to take away from the business acumen of those individuals, but they're starting with at a totally, they're way up the mountain before they even
Mhm.
decided they wanted to go climb the mountain. Their parents lived at the bottom of the mountain or halfway up the mountain, right? So all of us can choose a path and go in a particular direction, but it's really important to acknowledge for yourself as well that
Mhm.
we're all starting in different places. But no matter where you're starting, you can make progress towards where you're going, and you may find that like lake halfway up the mountain is way better than being on top. I've been on the top of mountains before. You might have been up there too. It's not that great. Yeah, you get a
Mhm.
view for a minute and you feel accomplished with what you did, but if I'm like trying to hang out somewhere, man, get me back below the tree line. I want to, I want to be where there's a lake and there's a little river coming through. So,
Mhm.
to your point, I'm not trying to be a billionaire. If it happened, sure, I'm not turning it down. But I have other pursuits in life that I would like that I would use my time, which is the most valuable asset. That I would go pursue other things once I get to a place where I'm like, yeah, I have enough finances to allow me to go do those things and not have to worry about,
Mhm.
where I'm at on a 9 to 5 basis.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's a question I wanted to pivot a little bit that I wanted to ask you,
Mhm.
because you're literally in the middle of like fundraising, right? And it's just like a lot of business, one, don't succeed, but then two, a lot of business never actually sell. They just end
Mm-hmm.
up, never the tradition of raising money to sell, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
from what I've learned and the little that I know, like people that are have businesses where they can raise money, right,
Mm-hmm.
and potentially sell, usually run their business and see their business way differently than people who just like watch a YouTube video. It's like, oh, let me start a business, or have an idea. And it's like, oh, let me start a business. Especially when they don't have an entrepreneurial experience. Like I asked one guy before on a podcast. His name is blanking right now, but like, I think I asked him like, how what got you started with your business, or what did you do when you first started your business? Yeah, he said the first thing I did when I started my business is I hired a CMO. Like I'm like, okay. So the first thing you do before you do anything, you built out your team. You're like, yeah, I hired a CMO, my CTO, and some other thing. Well, I forget what he said word for word, but his first thing was like, I put together my team, right? And usually, for at least for me, I start a business. I watch a YouTube video. All right, this is how you do it. Let me let me test it out a little bit,
Step one.
and find someone that'll pay for it. And that's how I. But it's like the way people go about a business is different. So like, what have you learned from getting to that stage where your business, and what do you have to do to make your business even have someone want to put money into it? Because there's a lot of business that, not because they wouldn't qualify, but like because like they just don't operate a business how a business is supposed
Mm-hmm.
to be operated, wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
don't qualify, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think there are definitely at least two different main paths of business. You've got your kind of lifestyle business, which
Hmm.
is more traditionally what you're talking about. Somebody see a little thing
Yeah.
on the internet and go, "Oh, I'm going to try that, and I'll go this direction." And they're highly subject to the particular person that's starting them and their knowledge base, and they're really, that individual stays really integrated in the system. When you look at a business like one that's going to go after funding and that wants to go have an exit someday, um, these are built. They're structured in a way to do exactly that. So from day one, hey, the fastest the best thing I can do is build this business so that it can function without me, because otherwise I'm beholden to the business, and people aren't going to want to buy a business where like I'm the linchpin.
Hmm.
So to your the point about the person you talked to before, and he was like, "Oh, I went out and hired these three positions." Like, you've got to think about this as though you aren't doing this for your day to day revenue. You are building a thing like you would build an apartment. You're not trying to. It's one thing to go off into the woods and like piece together your own little shanty lean to, and you're going to be like, "Yeah, this is going to be my house." It's a very different thing to say, "I need to build a structure that somebody's going to buy, and I'm never going to live there. Like, I'm going to build an apartment complex, and you're going to go about that in a very different way." I mean, one, you're probably going to have to start with some capital. Like your guy that's, hired a CMO and a COO and these other things is like, all right, so he probably had some funding and was willing to like risk it to begin with, or he had people that had time on their hands that could dedicate 6 months to getting something set up, and they were going to own some equity, but nobody was getting paid out of it yet. So it's kind of like, are we building here, or are we going to the mountaintop, to continue with that analogy. um, so yeah, I think one of the other things that kind of came up when you asked that question was this idea. I talk to people all the time about what's going on in the business, and like my mom will say like, "Oh, that's not fair, they can't do that to you." And I'm like, I started the business, I'm the founder of the business, it is not my business, right? Like, you get to a stage where it's no different than, like, to use real estate as an analogy, if I went out and found an amazing location, I was like, "Oh man, location, location, location," right? Like, this place is dope, we should set up here. I think here's the best use of it. And I put together a plan, and I, got a foundation going. And then I was like, all right, man, I need some help. I need additional capital. I need people that know how to do the development of this. I need people that have connections with the people that are going to want to buy this, so we can ask them what they're going to want to buy 3 years from now when we're done with it. And so I went out and sought that information, and people were like, "Yeah, I like what you've done so far. Cool. We'll throw in a bunch of money and we'll bring in a bunch of expertise." They now own part of the business in the same way that I do. Like, I put in sweat equity and some money. They've put in millions of dollars. So it's not my business anymore. And I think that's a really hard pill for some people to swallow, and one that often people won't have to, because they built a lifestyle business and that was never the plan. So
Mm.
if you're taking a lifestyle business mentality and then looking at what I deal with on a regular basis, and the fact that I went out and struck out on my own and took all these risks, and I had, my house mortgaged as collateral for some of the loans. I took some big swings to get here, and now I'm literally an employee, right? I'm not even our CEO anymore. I stepped aside and brought a CEO in, and so I'm on the board, and so the board's kind of main job is to hire and fire the CEO, and it's the CEO's job to figure out what do we need to do with this business over the next quarters, months, years, whatever, to get to that end goal where the investors to get what the investors want out of it. And in our case, that's an exit. And then in my case, I still had enough value as a founder and just some of the skill sets that I bring to stay on as an employee as well. But I have a day job, man. I'm an employee now at my own business. So it definitely, like, there's a major differentiation between a lifestyle business that you're like, yeah, cool. I really love doing this, and I'm going to fill the bottles of the perfume that I'm mixing up. And it's not at all to disparage those. Like, some people just love doing that, and that's what they want to do. And so they go off and they make a living doing it. Awesome. You're not likely to sell that business. So understanding what type of business you're trying to build and what that North Star is, where what is your mountaintop, so to speak. Yeah, that has huge implications as to how you go about structuring what you're doing and where you're trying to go, and how you spend your money, right? Like, if you're a lifestyle business and you're making profit, you're like, cool, not only can I pay myself, but I'm making another 50K a year in profit. You just, like, keep that rolling. It's great.
Yeah.
If you're trying to grow and you're working for, you have a company that's looking to sell out in a few years, all that profit goes right back into the business. And because, growth is kind of the metric that they're looking for. They need to get to a certain scale so that they can make that exit at, a multiplier of EBITDA that gets everybody what they're looking for. So how you operate the business and how you build it from the ground up is very different depending on which of those tracks you're on.
Yeah, no, I love that you made that distinction, and I love that you also like kind of mentioned it like real estate as well, because that just made perfect sense to me. Like building a little shed in the woods versus trying to build an apartment complex makes perfect sense. You're gonna need
Mm-hmm.
the developer. You're gonna need all the the manpower to actually put that. You're gonna talk to the town and get your your permits and all that stuff and zoning. And there's a whole lot of moving pieces when you're building an apartment complex versus building a shed in God knows where, right? And
Yeah.
it's very interesting because like I don't know why it kind of came to mind, but like last year, I started getting a lot more interested with why do some businesses like grow their business and like they'll get money. Some businesses get money in invest funding like before they even have their first ever client or any revenue. They just
Mm-hmm.
have off an idea, just off a conception. They're
Mm-hmm.
getting millions of dollars of funding. And there's other people who work their whole lives and like their business almost kind of becomes a job. And never heard. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I heard lifestyle business, but didn't really know how to actually describe it. But like I'm
Got it.
right now currently running a lifestyle business that I want to operate similarly to a more traditional like business that would like probably sell and get funding,
Mm-hmm.
but still keep it a lifestyle business so that I don't
Mm-hmm.
get consumed. And even though yes, it's my lifestyle, like don't make it my whole life because it can be very
Sure.
easy to do so because it's hard to like kind of distinguish from the two. Because like
Mm-hmm.
if your whole life is centered around it, then when you're not doing it, you kind of feel like I don't know. It's been hard because like if you don't keep the engine going, it's like it just completely dies out because not only people buying your product or service, but a lot of them are also just buying you, the person, the face.
That's what I was just going to get into. Yeah, exactly. Like, you've got that personal brand that you can develop that into a scale and something of value to where now your name just carries weight and you don't have to be behind it anymore. I mean, you look at the George Foreman grill, for example, and I don't know, like, I don't know the backstory on that, how it all came about, but I'm sure that the product had nothing to do with George. They just were like, hey, he's a great face for it. And so now here I am still talking about it, and I don't even know if he's still associated. So you could do that same kind of thing, right? Where you build up the John Mendez brand, and
Yeah.
it becomes the thing that it's trusted. So that's what you're really building there is a brand, and that brand can be licensed. It can be leveraged in all sorts of different ways, and or whatever whatever company you build around it can be kind of productized, and that in and of itself can be sold. and you're no longer a part of it. So it can be done, but to your point, you need to be thinking about it in that way. If you like, the more and more you keep like, I've got to get hands on and I've got to be making all of these decisions and not bringing in other people to do it, like you're going to sell yourself, at best case scenario, if you ever got interest, you're selling yourself into a lifelong job. And now it's not even your business. You've sold it, but you still have to like make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's important to understand those distinctions so that you kind of know what you're trying to pursue, what you can and can't do, and how you might go about doing it either way.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. Tyrone, time has been flying. I don't know if you've noticed, but man,
Damn.
like time has literally flown. Where can we keep up with you? Where can we connect with you so that if we want to potentially hop what they call it, koozies? They're called koozies, right?
Yeah. So I've got,
Te-
yeah, we call them,
technically,
we're not allowed to use the word. It's
okay. I
copywritten, unfortunately,
I
but,
apologize. We're
you
not
can,
doing anything with
say
koozies.
it.
Oh, okay.
We're trying to, we actually created a whole new, what we call a category,
Yeah,
in the space. And so we call it drinkware, but drinkware,
drinkware. I wish I had
WEAR,
one.
like
That would have been dope to show off.
clothing. I'll get one to you. Let
Yeah,
me grab one
I
here.
didn't know they existed until like I was at the blocks. I'm like, what's on your
Right.
cup? And it's like
Right.
I forget what it was, but it was some hoodie. And like I'm
Yeah.
like,
It's just a
huh,
hoodie for your beer, for your drink, right?
yeah.
So that's it. Yeah, you can check us out at Puffin Drinkwear. And again, wear is spelled WEAR, not
Mm,
drinkware like you would traditional see, WARE,
yeah.
because it's something you wear. So Puffin, PUFFIN, drinkware.com. And then more personally, I've got, my coaching consulting business, which is just my name, TyroneHazen.com. You can check me out there, jump on the newsletter, and reach out for consultation if anybody's in the startup space with a consumer good product. I love having those conversations and helping where I can.
Amazing. Now it's time for our famous 5 questions, and I'm super excited to hear what you got for us. So, question
Okay.
number one: what is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
Okay, most impactful lesson. I think it goes back. It's this idea that we were talking about earlier of, your time is your most valuable asset. Like hands down. Like and in fact, actually, I'm going to take it one more level, and this is something I've been playing with and been working on.
Okay.
It's not even so much your time. Time is kind of the backdrop on which your attention plays.
Mm-hmm.
So attention is the most valuable thing that you have, because you can spend an hour doing something and not really pay much attention, or you can spend that same hour doing something and with a lot of focus and attention, and there's going to be a difference between those two things, right? So your attention is really like the most valuable thing, resource that you have. So pay close attention to how you use it,
Yeah, it's not how many
where
hours
you
you put
spend it.
in, but what you put in hours, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, that's perfect. That's a perfect example. Exactly. Yeah. So attention, and it's like really tough these days with all of the things competing for our attention, to stay focused on that and not just get caught in like the scrolling,
Mm-hmm.
pattern.
100%. What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
I have an 11-year-old son, and I am always, advising him just kindness to people. Like, you'll never lose being kind to people. I think that that's a really tough one to be. And I think it probably, like, it so many things are integrated in kindness. Like, it's hard to be kind and lie to somebody. Like, that's not
Mm-hmm.
being kind if you are lying. So like integrity and, truthfulness and honesty and those kind of things are all built into kindness. But I think it wraps it up really well. Just be kind to people. You're gonna make your way in this world, and you're gonna enjoy the journey.
If you had to change someone's life but only had one book, which book would you recommend?
Oh, I mean, for right off the cuff, like, I would say Rich Dad Poor Dad. I don't know if to change it for the better or the
No
worse. I might
worries.
have like, I might have been better off to go to like just pursue a regular career, but I've had an interesting journey, and, there was definitely a pivot there, and it sounds like you had the same experience. So that's a great one.
What is the legacy that you're working on leaving behind?
I don't think a whole lot about legacy. I have kind of I don't want to call it a nihilistic view on life, but I know that it doesn't matter, right? In the grand scheme of things, like, we know the
Yeah.
universe is going to cool off and we're all going to be dead one day. And so, I don't think too much about a legacy so much as living my life on a daily basis, in a way that I find virtuous, in a way that I'm contributing to other people, and I'm here now enjoying this wild journey of like 10 billion years into the Big Bang. Like, this is still the Big Bang. It's just like the tail. It's not even the tail end of it. We're just in some section of the Big Bang, and I'm just like riding around on a frozen rock in the middle of space, man.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't think too much about leaving a legacy so much as living right now.
Amazing. And final question, for anyone that wants to embark on their walk to wealth today, what is the first step you recommend they take?
Education. Educate yourself, and it's going to sound like I'm promoting myself, and I'm not at all. But like coaching, to your point, like find that knowledge wherever you can. Books are great, but one-on-one direct information, or even a one-person coaching a group, is kind of like your fastest level up. I mean, you think about somebody that wants to go into pro golfing, they're going to hire a coach before they hire a caddy, right? So like if you are trying to get somewhere, you need someone that has taught you, that has done those things before. They're going to be the best person to teach you. So find all the ways to educate yourself, and try them all.
100%. Pay for speed, I always say, and pay for access. That's especially when you're young like me. Like there's a lot of life that I have yet to live, and so that's all I've been doing for the past 2 years is paying for speed and paying for access, so I can shortcut all of the years that I would have had to live to learn these lessons. And
Man, I
podcasting
love
is
those
one of them.
phrases.
Podcasting is one of them, man. This is the I get to talk to people like you and to get steal all your lessons and then apply it to
Yeah,
my
no,
life.
I think it's brilliant what you're doing, and like those phrases. I hadn't heard those before, but like pay for speed, pay for access.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It's brilliant because we do have that limited timeline. So the faster you can, whatever it is, whether it's your revenue or your education, your knowledge, the faster, like the steeper you can make that curve, the better. The farther you're going to get, the more, get the mathematics, but like the more area under that
Yeah.
curve in the long run. And if that's what you're looking for, then that's the way to go get it.
100%. Tyrone, man, I could feel like I talked to you for another like 3 hours. Honestly, time has flown, so we're definitely gonna have
It
to
went quick, man.
come back and do another one of these in a couple months or so. So stay on the lookout, man. But thanks again for
Absolutely,
hopping
man.
on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for letting me be a guest. Appreciate what you're doing, John.